I wish artists wouldn't rush things so much sometimes. And sessions are so scattered now, like you'll do a record over the span of like 6 months, but it's with four different producers or something like that. Harder to make things cohesive and all work together. But yeah, and trends. I don't want artists chasing trends. I think that's a big thing for me too.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment because sometimes I feel like even like on the mix side, and maybe you can relate, Eric. Sometimes I feel like when I mix a song, I don't want any band I've ever mixed to sound like any other band I've mixed. But obviously we all have a style, right? And then there's like, well, we have to fit something in a certain box because it's going to Octane, but let's do something a little different. But we don't want to take too many risks. And it's always this battle. I mean, technically the producer should be working with the band to create the sound, but I always like to push. I mean, James, for example, this is one thing I really respect about the Daedric record is like those guys are just beaten to their own drum and they wanted to make a really artistic record. And there was like no preconceptions. Every song was different. And I mean, there are songs that are like almost 100% real drums on there. And there are songs that are like programmed, it doesn't matter. What matters is they made an artistic record. I wish more artists would do that. And I wish there was like a less pressure just in general, because again, everybody wants, they're all chasing metrics. They're all chasing data. They're all chasing. I wish there was more effort put into like, let's make something really unique, because again, that's the difference between good art that does well and great art that we're talking about 30 years later from now is, something comes out like when, like, I'll give you an example. Like, remember when Paramore came out and like that snare drum that Ben Death and his team came up with, like that changed the sound of snare mixes for a decade after that. Cause everybody's like, oh, that's sick. How do we get that sound? And like, people aren't doing that anymore. It's like, I feel like we play it too safe. And there's also a lot of pressure to play it safe. And I just wish that people would embrace more artistic decisions, and hopefully AI will actually, which may sound counterintuitive, but I hope AI will actually kind of fix the industry in that regards. Like, getting like a certain baseline will be anybody can do it, but to make something special really requires, like the effort, and
Yeah.
like the real artists will come to the top of that and thrive. I hope.
I was
I do
waiting for
think,
someone to bring up AI. I was waiting for
yeah.
it, dude. It's bound to happen. I think it's a great tool to start ideas and start songs, but I think we all have similar opinions on finalizing songs with AI and whatnot. But I think it's a great tool. I think it could be a great tool.
But people lean more
Definitely-
to like the human side, like
Definitely makes people who don't understand song structure and stuff, like it's kind of a tutorial on songwriting. Well, I've seen tremendous growth in some of my clients who have been kind of using it as far as their understanding of like note choice and sort of leading tones and things. It's like, oh, I'm sometimes blown away by these choruses they come up with. Because prior, I'm like, you would never have thought of that. So it does. It is a great tool. Also, Joel, I find that like bands like, maybe this is a label, but bands like the idea of being cutting edge more than they actually do like being cutting edge. Because I've had so many chats. I feel like I have the preliminary talk with every band, and we always hang up, and they're like, I want to do all these styles and I don't want to sound like anyone else. And then you're like, great, that's amazing. I'm so in. And then they slowly get uncomfortable and they whittle it down. And then by the end, they just send you like a Zach Cervini mix and they go, make it this. And then you go, but everything we talked about is, and it's like, and maybe some of that's the label too. The label saying, like, because I've had the instance a few times where we fired off something to a label and me and the band are stoked on it. And then the label's like, this sounds too different. This is not going to go with on Octane. And then we have to kind of destroy it slowly.
Well, that would never be our response.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever said it quite to that. There's obviously a certain standard of like, I don't know, loudness meters and all that stuff that go into a proper master and a mix and whatnot. I think it all comes down to just everything being a little subjective. It's just what's proper for that project. Every artist is different. So to me, that's what it all comes down to.
Well, that's good.
I also think that, really pushing boundaries a lot of times doesn't have the immediate feedback loop that they actually want. You have to be willing to kind of stand out there and do something different when everybody isn't just jumping on. And then it sometimes takes, a couple of years for some records to kind of be these like slow burners. And all of a sudden people are like, this was way ahead of its time. This is like so unique. But I think people want quick feedback. So they just want to do what's going to be popular right now. And they get stuck in that cycle versus really making a statement.
Yeah, it's like a risk reward thing, because it's like for every generation, for example, you might have like, remember when Skrillex came out? It was so out of left field unless you were like a hardcore underground dubstep nerd. But for the rest of us in the more mainstream, like when that came out, it was so different. And for every one of those, there's 100 more artists that are successful that kind of fit in, it's like 3 Days Grace and Nickelback and Breaking Benjamin, and they were all active rock bands. All of them sounded different, but they could all tour together. And then like, they're like System of a Down would be like the totally out of left field, or Sleep Token for now. I guess I'm going back 2 decades, but like, like Sleep Token is kind of the off the wall band right now that's totally different. And I think people are always looking for different, but there's a certain amount of risk that's associated with being like a true artist and like just kind of going in your own lane. And either it hits or it doesn't. And if it hits huge, everybody chases it. And if it doesn't hit, well, we know what that looks like too. So, I think there's like an asymmetric risk reward payoff there. And I can see how that scares a lot of artists, because I feel like I have this conversation, as I'm sure you guys do almost weekly with the people that I work with.
Yeah. I think the pioneers need to stand alone for a little bit to make a long lasting impact. And honestly, that's what I spend a lot of my time looking for. And that's the stuff that gets me excited the most, is who's doing something that's not being done right now. Maybe not exactly, but in a more tasteful way, just something that's a little bit different. And I don't know, when it's done right, you might get some heat for it in the beginning, and some people might not understand it right away. But I think eventually good music always, gravitates towards people, whether it takes 5 years or even a week to come back to a song and then you truly love it. But yeah, I'm all for that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that gets me excited.
If you found this conversation to be valuable, please take a moment to like the video and make sure you're subscribed. It helps more independent artists discover these conversations. Fixed Academy is also supported by our Patreon members. If you want deeper conversations, extended sessions, and direct access to what we're building here, you can join us there. The link is in the description.